Doug Peterson spoke today. Some interesting stuff on Fletcher Cox. I think the stuff with Fletcher Cox and Darren Sproles was really the highlight of it. But some other things as well that stood out to me. Scott Grayson from 97.3 ESPN.com. Grayson's grades of the all-season edition. He was at the NovaCare Center today, and we're going to get his take on some of the things that stood out to him. Doug Peterson speaking, and a chance to see the team in action as everybody out in the field. Scott, how much on the field work there for Fletcher Cox today?
He was in and out a little bit. The bummer was that the weather, the storm, there was a storm that blew through, and it forced them inside the bubble. So they weren't even outside, so they're dealing with the condensed space of working inside the bubble. So, they're moving and shaking through practice, but he's in and he's out, he's in and he's out. He's just mostly just trying to get back into the flow of things, is what it looks like to me.
Yeah, and Doug Peterson said today, look, I'm not concerned about him. He's smart. He knows what he's doing. He's missing the installs, but he's not really all that concerned about them. Did Fletcher, afterwards, I think he was asked about training camp and whether or not he thought he'd be there. He said, look, I don't want to talk about my contract. That'll be taken care of with the team. But what did he say about being there for training camp? Because obviously that will be the next big thing that we'll be looking for with him. If he doesn't have that contract, will he show up to training camp?
Well, when I was around Fletcher Cox in the locker room there before practice, he wasn't addressing that. He was just pretty much saying, listen, the past is in the past. I'm here now. That's all that matters. I'm just trying to get my work in and get familiar with the playbook. And he wouldn't go there, although what was interesting, I think you were referring to this a little bit earlier about Doug Peterson, was Peterson basically said he expects a deal to be done. So, clearly there's stuff being, going on behind the scenes, and that's where it seems like they're at right now.
Scott Grayson was at training camp today, more on today's camp, and Darren Sproles is the other one who wasn't there, and he basically said, look, I'm happy with the team. I'm happy with my contract. I had a family issue. That's all it comes down to. So what kind of role does it look like? Because I keep saying you had Jamal Charles, Spencer Ware, Charchandrick West. When Charles got hurt, West was the guy. When West got hurt, they went to Ware. It seems like Doug Peterson and Andy Reid like to feature a guy in this offense.
Yeah, and I would think Ryan Matthews is the guy who's going to be featured, although I think they like the idea. Sproles, when you think about it for a coach, he's like that shiny toy that is so exciting because you don't really get the chance to have a guy like that who's as versatile as he is in the ways that he can be effective. And, I think honestly that the way they look at him is, he's going to be a special teams weapon. He's a guy we can put out of the backfield and move around. And I think in terms of running the ball, Matthews is the guy who they're going to look at. Now, then the unknown question mark is, where does Wendell Smallwood fit in all this? Because he is almost like a younger version of Sproles with the way he can catch the ball out of the backfield. So, it's still unknown exactly how they're going to look to use all these guys. And when I was looking out there, they've got the fullback now that Peterson's going to look to use as well to block and open up things. And I was looking there, and I was talking to John McMullen today at practice, who I know you're going to have on later. And, there's 5 backs there. Somebody's got to be an odd guy out. To me, you'd think it'd be Kenyon Barner, but with Sproles out, Barner was the guy getting a lot of the reps. So it's a lot to decipher as we head into training camp is the way it looks.
Yeah, a lot of talk, too, about Carson Wentz. I heard people asking, he's had some wobbly passes. He seems to be taking more downfield shots than the other quarterbacks, and he kind of addressed that. And overall, your impression of seeing Wentz, was this the first time you got a chance to see him out on the field, and your thoughts on him and some of the things that Peterson had to say about him?
Yeah, physically speaking, Wentz definitely is the tallest of the 3 quarterbacks. You notice that first and foremost when you see him. Now, they were doing a lot of footwork drills, and the knock on Wentz has been that his footwork has not been quite, where the Eagles would like it to be. That's one of the things he's got to work on and learn. And it's interesting as they roll out, and we're doing a lot of rollout drills, and we're doing different, like I said, drills that involve throwing the ball. Wentz, to me, his passes are wobbly, and my sense is it's because he's so focused on trying to make sure he's doing the right thing with his feet right now. Almost after every pass, you would see Frank Reich right there with Wentz to talk to him and explain to him this, that, and the other thing about that particular rep. So, Reich is right there with him. Doug Peterson was constantly talking to Sam Bradford occasionally after some of his reps. And Bradford, it's interesting when you see the three quarterbacks roll out, Chase Daniel, Sam Bradford, and Carson Wentz. To Wentz, it looks pretty natural. To Daniel, it looks like a guy who's been doing it in this offense. And to Bradford, it's still uncomfortable. And he's got to try to work on that is what it looks like. But he was still throwing spirals. Wentz's passes were wobbly. And like I said, I think that's because he's really focused on trying to work on his footwork right now and then bring the arm along once he's got that comfort under control.
Scott Grayson here on 97.3 ESPN. How would Doug Peterson assess the tight ends? And he talked about how creative he can get in the offense. He seemed to think that was the strongest part of his offense.
Yeah, and again, it was interesting. Chip Kelly at practices, and Peterson moved off the quarterbacks and was actually right there in the mix with the tight ends, trying to help them run a route a little bit better, and in a break it back outside kind of route. And he was working with that on Ertz and Selleck to get those guys to kind of just do. It was a little thing with keeping their eyes up and how to break out of it quickly in that particular drill that I was watching. But yeah, he's very excited about these tight ends and the ways that he's going to be able to use them. And he knows he's got several good weapons there that have been proven. Again, you hear him talk about with Ertz, he's got to improve his blocking, and that's what they're working on as much as anything else with him. But he's excited about what Selleck brings. And I think, Selleck has made some big grabs for this organization. And I think he looks to Selleck to be a guy who can make some of those catches in a two tight end set as well. Clearly, Ertz is the number one. And, yeah, you could just see the fire and the excitement in Peterson when he came over to work with those tight ends, just how much he's in tune to keep them going and be a part of this offense.
I thought another interesting kind of revelation today was about training camp, and he indicated that unlike, and you can kind of attest to this because you've covered the entire Chip Kelly era up there, they didn't hit a whole heck of a lot. They didn't wear the pads. They didn't do a lot of hitting. You can expect there to be a different feel around training camp this year.
Yeah, he said, and he said there'll be a number of periods where they'll do full tackling. And, you haven't seen that with Chip. The rest of the time, Peterson said he referred to it as thuds. They'll make the contact, and the hands will go off, and they'll let the running back break off or receiver. But, yeah, there's going to be some full contact. And you know what? It was interesting hearing Brandon Graham when we were talking to him in the locker room. It sounds like, some of the defensive guys, I'm sure, are excited about that. They don't get the chance to really hit these guys on their own team very much. And, yeah, you worry about injuries, which is why, if I heard Peterson correctly and I'm inferring the right thing, I don't think it's going to take place a lot, but there will be an occasional period here or there where they will do some full contact and full hitting. And, I think that's really going to help the defensive guys. They go into the preseason and early in the year, and that's the first hitting they're truly getting, tackling of players. And I think that's going to help. I was happy to hear that from Peters.
Hey, I know you got a chance to talk with Chris Givens as well. I think he's kind of an interesting wild card in the wide receiver thing here. It's all Matthews and Aguilar and Ruben Randall. More people know about him. But Givens actually has a rapport with Bradford. What did you talk to Givens about? What did you learn from talking to him today? Do you think he's a guy that people are overlooking?
Well, I talked to Givens about that rapport with Bradford. They were together in St. Louis. They've been apart from each other for a few years. And I asked him, quite frankly, if he's seen growth in Bradford, which he said he has. But in particular, having that familiarity, Bradford said today that Givens is a guy who was like, just walking back on a bike again. You're riding a bike again with. He just came back together, and they've picked up with their chemistry right where they left off in St. Louis. Givens really liked Bradford. Bradford really liked throwing to Givens. So, yeah, I think Givens, for him, he's a guy who's really trying to prove something. And he told me, I don't want to be known as just deep threat. There's a lot of other things I can do, and that's what I'm trying to show this coaching staff, that I can be an every down wide receiver. So,
although that's something though, Scott, they've been lacking is a deep threat. So if he can give them that, that's even if that's the minimum he gives them, that's something they haven't had.
Yeah, when he said it, I thought the same thing, and I thought, well, you should just embrace the fact that you could be a deep threat and live off that here with this team because they haven't had that. And They haven't had that. And he is a guy, if he can give it, and like I said, inside the bubble, they weren't going to be able to stretch the field or do a whole lot with throwing downfield. But, yeah, I like the addition of Givens, and I like the kid, what he's bringing. You know, a lot of them really feel like when you talk to these players that they all have in some way, no pun intended, but a chip on their shoulder. They have something to prove. They don't think that they've been utilized fully the way that they can bring their skills to the table. And Givens is one of those guys who really wants to prove a lot more than just, hey, I can go downfield.
Scott Grayson's with us, and, of course, during the season, you can read Grayson's grades at 973ESPN.com. He, again, will be covering training camp and the Eagles this year, including that opener against the Cleveland Browns. Ryan Matthews, the guy you spoke to today, and we talked a little bit about the running backs. His big problem has been the health. But my question for you is, does he look bigger, smaller? I mean, did you see a different Ryan Matthews? Because, again, he missed some time last year due to injury. He missed a lot of the OTAs with some, I think it was a groin injury this year. So do you see a different Ryan Matthews?
He looked to be bouncing around a little bit more in terms of agility. Again, you're seeing these guys in shorts and a helmet, no pads. But, you know, he looked to be bouncing around, like I said, with his agility. And when I talked to him, I mean, physically speaking, he looked good. He talked about how in this break here after OTAs, he's going to be focused a lot on strength training and continuing to keep himself in good shape, not relax too much like some of these guys can do when they break away from the field and the facility. But, yeah, I mean, I think he's – you know, when you talk to Ryan Matthews, he's a very monotone kind of guy. You don't get the sense too much one way or another what he really is thinking or how much he may be embracing something when he's talking about it. But in terms of his health, I mean, that was the one thing he talked at length with me about coming out of this OTAs, that I think he's really looking forward to going into training camp as a truly, totally healthy guy with something, again, another guy with something to prove. He had to share carries with DeMarco last year, and he's the guy, I think, who looks at himself as being the feature back in this offense. So that's what he's trying to prove. And I got the sense, physically speaking, he's good to go.
Hopefully. And I'm interested to see what kind of role he has from Doug Peterson, who we kind of alluded to. He likes to kind of feature a guy, it seems like, or at least they did in Kansas City. Scott Grayson up at the NovaCare Center today, where the Eagles continue their OTAs here on the Sports Bash 97.3 ESPN. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, Mike.